Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. What's up, people? This is Balaji, and welcome to another edition of The Demand Wars. Now, he's the executive producer of B2B Growth, your favorite marketer's favorite show. He's the force behind Sweet Fish Media, where commodity content is the enemy, with content franchises like The Journey, Echo Chamber, Original Research. He's on a mission to make B2B cool again. Or maybe for the first time. Please help me welcome the counselor of content-based networking, the abbot of affinity, the founder of Sweet Fish Media, James Carbary. What's up, James?
That was the most epic intro I've ever had in my entire life. Balaji, this is going to be incredible, man.
Too much? Not too.
No. that was just right.
We had to set it up, man. We had to set it up. Just right? Okay, good. Because we're trying to let people know what they're in for. They're in for a treat. You've been on the cutting edge for the past couple of years, along with Dan, along with Logan when he was with the company. Benji's now in the hot seat. Emily's about to come back off of the bench. You guys have been blazing a trail and forcefully bringing that cool that a lot of us see in our favorite B2C brands, injecting that into B2B. Why in the world are you all taking on what to some does not seem like a trivial mission at all?
So I think, Balaji, there's this belief, there has been this traditional belief in B2B that because we're talking to people in a business context where they where they make their money for their family, when they have their work hat on, that they're somehow different people than when they're at home watching Netflix with their family. And I just don't think that's true. And so I think communicating to people as though you have this buttoned up suit with a tie on and in this very formal style of communication. I mean, years ago, I thought that was wrong. When we started Sweetfish and I started looking at the B2B landscape, I was not familiar with B2B really at all before I started Sweetfish. And so I remember as kind of an onlooker to the industry, somebody that wasn't familiar with it, didn't come up in it, I had a very weird path to starting Sweetfish. And so I'm looking at this going, man, this just isn't how humans interact. It's not how humans are. And so this should be different. And it's been really fun the last 7 years as we've been building Sweetfish to try to figure out how do we poke some holes in that? How do we inject fun? How do we still make our content smart? We say that the three defining characteristics for our content, we want it to be smart, fun, and fresh. And so I think we lead with smart. We want what we're saying and what we're doing to actually be able to help move the needle for marketing leaders. We want them, when they think of Sweetfish, to say, I have an unfair advantage in my job because I consume content from B2B Growth, from the folks over at Sweetfish. But we also want it to be fun. We want it to be fresh. We want to borrow and look at what the creator economy is doing. You and I were talking about that a little bit before we hit record. Like, it's not like this stuff is rocket science. There are thousands of creators out here doing this kind of stuff and breaking new ground and just doing things that are incredibly creative. There's no reason we can't look at what they're doing and try to figure out how can we inject some of that freshness into what we're delivering to our market. So that's what we've been trying to do the last few years.
It's fascinating, James, and I think we all appreciate what good, effective marketing looks like. Fun, fresh, and smart marketing looks like. We see tons of examples in B2C. We're starting to see some in B2B. But when you said breaking new ground, all these creators out there breaking new ground, there are a few characteristics that sort of pop into my mind, right? A lot of times they're young, not necessarily, but on the B2C side, especially on YouTube, TikTok, not necessarily young, but at least have an innovative new approach. They're often solopreneurs or small companies. And I think this is relevant, James, because when you said the word breaking, B2B customers a lot of times are bringing in such a large average contract value that management might feel, look, we can't risk you breaking something by trying something new, even if it might work.
Yeah.
How do you think marketers can combat that fear of possibly getting fired if a good idea goes awry?
Yeah. I got asked this question earlier this week, and I'm not actually sure that it's fear that's keeping people from doing this. I think there are enough brands like Gong, what we saw Drift do in 2016, 2017, Metadata, Chili Piper. Um, I think there are enough brands pushing the envelope, what Kyle Lacey did at Lessonly before they got acquired by Seismic. There's enough brands doing this stuff that I'm not sure that it's fear, because I think there's enough stories to be able to go to your boss and say, hey, look, this brand that the market seems to love, they're doing things differently. They're doing merch drops like YouTubers do. They're coming out with albums on Spotify. Like, they're doing interesting things, and those interesting things are translating to a lot of affinity for their brand. So I don't know that it's fear. What I think it is that it actually takes an enormous amount of talent to do this kind of stuff. And so having someone like Emily Brady on our team now, I mean, Emily Brady has creator blood. Benji has creator blood. We've got folks on our marketing team that have creator blood, and that's not a given. I think as marketers, a lot of marketers think, oh, because I'm in marketing, I am a creator. And my observation, at least looking at a lot of creators in the on YouTube and TikTok and other platforms, there's two specific skill sets that I've observed that I have not necessarily seen in the hundreds and hundreds of marketers that we've had on B2B growth. They're different skill sets, but and both are good, both are necessary. But creators have this understanding of human psychology. They seem to just intuitively know what's going to resonate with somebody in a way like I haven't seen before. And they also understand platform nuances of these social platforms at a level of granularity and detail that puts most marketers that I know, at least the marketers in B2B, to absolute shame. And so but between those two characteristics, I it actually takes a lot of time to like either develop that skill, or it is something that comes naturally, but it's pretty rare. And so I don't think that it's fear keeping these brands from embracing this as much as it is they don't have the talent on their team to actually pull it off, and they need to go and find that creator blood, so to speak. I probably won't use that phrase after this interview, but that creator ethos, that the person that
The
just
gene.
knows intuitively what connects with somebody. Go and find those people. They don't have to be from your industry. If you're in waste management and you're selling a CRM to trash companies, you don't need to go and find somebody that knows the ins and outs of the trash industry. You can go and find somebody that just that has built an audience of their own. They know what content is going to resonate and what content's not going to resonate. They can learn your industry. You can have your subject matter experts teach them that part, but they're going to know how these platforms work, and they're going to know what content is going to resonate, and then you can slot them into your system, and you're going to stand
Mm.
out. That's exactly what we've seen. As we've brought folks like Dan, folks like Benji, folks like Emily into our marketing team, because I honestly don't think that I have a lot like, I don't understand platform nuances at that level. I don't think I really intuitively understand what's going to resonate and what's not. The more content I've created over LinkedIn over the years, I think I've gotten a little bit better there, but there are still people way better at that stuff than I am. Um, and so anyway, so that's my 2 cents there. I don't know that it's much fear as it is they don't have the actual talent, because it takes a high level of talent to be able to pull this stuff off, and that I think oftentimes gets shoved under the rug,
Mm.
and people just think, oh, anybody can do this. No, it's actually a really tough skill.
It's been fun, James, to sort of watch the evolution of Sweetfish Media, um, and what some might regard as, or it maybe should be a commoditized industry by now. We could say there's a lot of companies that will produce a podcast for you, and yet when we think about Sweetfish and we listen to your content, especially as you're starting to franchise more and give us a peek behind the curtain, you've got the journey, you've got the echo chamber, you're producing original research. it does almost doesn't feel like a podcast creation company, even though I would imagine that if we boil it down to the very core and nucleus, that's core to what you do, but
Yeah.
you're more about helping brands build affinity, create content that's not commodity content.
Yeah.
Tell us how you've managed to differentiate in what could otherwise be a commoditized market.
It's funny. It might actually be a video that I post on LinkedIn today, but I've been looking at this landscape for the last year and seeing all these other podcast agencies pop up, and I think you, as an entrepreneur, you can look at competition, you can look at the accelerated pace that technology is changing, and you can have a very defeatist mindset, and you can say, oh man, like when I started this, nobody was doing this, and now we've got all these competitors. And when I started this, there wasn't even such a thing as podcast tech, and now podcast tech is everywhere, and you've got these massive players now spending tens of
Hmm.
millions of dollars to acquire these startups that are building analytics software and auto editors and all these different things. So you can have a very defeatist mindset, or you can look at that stuff and go, okay, how are we going to rise above that to see how can we add value beyond what technology can bring, beyond what these other agencies can bring.
Hmm.
And so the thing that we've decided to go all in with is leveling up our talent and really focusing on strategic editorial. And you, it's so funny, Balaji, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think we're in this interesting spot right now where there's so much demand for podcast services that we continue to keep kind of podcast agency as our positioning, because there's so many people out there looking for a podcast agency. But really what we're doing is building media brands. And I think you're going to see a lot more in 2023 of us, leaning into newsletters, leaning into YouTube, some other types of content. But what I want to be careful of is, as it relates to the positioning of the agency, I don't want to just become another content agency. I think there are lots of folks that do lots of different content, and because they do lots of different types of content, they're not really known for anything. I've got
Hmm.
a lot of my friends are owning other agencies, and I see the downside of not having strong positioning. When you do everything for everybody, you become nothing to everybody. And so by us being a podcast agency, at least for the time being, I mean, there's definitely more competition in the space than there was back when we started, but there's not enough yet for it to not be a good differentiator for us. So that's going to be a balance that we're walking. We know internally what we're really doing is creating media brands, but externally we've chosen to continue the positioning of being a podcast agency. But it's really really good observation on your part, because we're not talking a lot about that publicly yet, and the fact that you're already seeing that come out in our messaging means that I think we're on the right track and trying to walk that line.
Yeah, it definitely is coming through. I wanted to highlight a book that I read several years ago titled "The One Thing" by Gary Keller. It's one of my favorite books. I revisit it about once a year. Considering we're going to the holiday season, usually that's the time when B2B professionals have a little bit of a chance to unwind. Often we're working way too hard. But that's a book I would recommend everybody read because it resonates. When you're known for that one thing, I mean, remember Google used to be just known for search. If they
Mm-hmm.
hadn't dominated search first, we wouldn't have them doing all the other things that they're doing today. So
Yeah.
that's a point well taken, James. All right, so James, I'd like to jump us into the demand wars competitive section now. We've got you all warmed up. Now we're about to heat that seat up a little bit. So we're going to jump into Desert Island Marketer. If you are ready, James, you ready for the demand wars?
I'm ready. I am ready for the desert island. Bring it on.
Let's go. Let's go. All right. So, James, you've been helicoptered onto a desert island. You're given a budget of $1,000 a month only. You've got to take a brand to market, a B2B brand to market with that very limited budget. How do you do it?
So I think I would run the same playbook that I've run several times at this point in my career. But I would start a podcast, and I would figure out who are the movers and shakers in the industry that I need to know, who are my ideal buyers that I want to build relationships with, who are potential referral partners that I know would be really strategic for me to lock arms with. I would start a show not about what I do, but I would start a show about the industry that I'm serving, and what is the persona of the people that I'm trying to serve. And I would just start doing content-based networking. I would start doing content collaborations as much as I could, obviously from an island. Hopefully they have internet on the island, and I can jump on Riverside and interview folks in the industry that I'm trying to serve. But that's exactly what I would do. And I think, I hear a lot of people say that, there's, building a media company, doing this is so expensive. You have to have all the, I mean, I, I did it. I did it for B2B growth whenever we had, didn't have two pennies to rub together. I've done it with, Young Married Christian. I've done it with so many of our client shows at this point. It's crazy. But I think for $1,000 a month, if you wanted to get scrappy, you could figure out how to make content-based networking work. And that's how I would go to market.
That's really interesting. You called out a distinction there, James, that I want to highlight. You said I'll start a podcast. Okay, he's a podcast guy. We expected him to say that. He literally has the letter P on his hat. All right, but you said you're going to create a show not about what you do, but about the industry and the personas. I want to
Yeah.
highlight. Folks might not notice. I've got on a white shirt today. I actually have on all white. James and I were talking right before we started recording about the fact that I'm going to watch the Black Panther movie right after this. So my wife is actually outside the room looking at the clock. So I've got a hard stop, but I've got the all white on, and pretty much everybody in the movie theater is going to have the all white on. This is an event. We're not just paying $10 or $11 or $12 to go to a movie. People feel like for a certain segment, this is us. This is our story. I mean, that's a powerful thing when you can get people actually dressing up, dressing alike to go to the
Yes.
movies. And when you create a show that's not about your brand, I'm not thinking about Marvel. I'm not thinking about Disney. I'm thinking about that this is a show about the culture. This is for the culture. We've got to be able to put our customers at the center of our stories and make them the hero of our story. So that's what I took away from your strategy here, James.
Yeah, the story that I tell all the time. I mean, what we did with B2B growth. B2B growth just, I think last month it hit #1 in the marketing category in the US. And there's no way that we would have a #1 rated marketing podcast had we named the show the B2B podcasting show, which is our expertise and what we do. Instead, we named it B2B growth. We went after VPs of marketing, marketing leaders at these B2B companies. We told their stories. We learned from them what struggles they're going through. Now we're starting to shift the show away from being exclusively interview based, but we're still talking about B2B growth. And yes, do we talk about B2B podcasting from time to time? Obviously, I think you have to at some point inject what you do into your content. It can't just be something that you never talk about, but you can do it in creative ways. Like you mentioned earlier, the journey is a content franchise within B2B growth, where we talk about our journey to building B2B growth to be every marketer's favorite media brand. And in our pursuit of talking about that, we're naturally going to talk about what we do at Sweetfish, but it's not this on the nose, buy our thing type of rallying cry that you see a lot of marketers doing. And that's all they're doing is talking about their thing. They're not creating content that is helpful outside of the context of what they specifically do. And I think that's part of the secret sauce of creating a media brand, of creating a show that actually resonates, is you have to get out of the box of what you do.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, James. I'm actually going to push you in this next segment called 3, 3, and 3. We're talking about, if we use Gary Vaynerchuk's language, a lot of jab, 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 and then the occasional right hook. So a lot of value, 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 and then the occasional, here's what I have to offer. But a number of marketers, especially at maybe high growth B2B companies, SaaS companies, particularly at the end of quarter, end of year, find themselves in a situation where management is telling them, we need more right hooks. So, James, you've been asked to create demand for your B2B brand and fast. How would you do that? I want you to answer this three different ways. So, give us three different strategies. How would you create demand in 3 days? Pretty much impossible, but we're going to ask you to do it. 3 weeks, and then finally 3 months. So let's go with the first one. This is the Tasmanian Devil special. How do you create demand from scratch in 3 days?
So I think in 3 days, the way I would pull it off would be trying to go to an experience or an event, a conference that where all of my buyers are hanging out, and do something crazy at that event. So I would rent an ice cream truck and pull it up to the event, like my buddy. I think I learned that
Oh,
from my buddy Dale Dupree, um, or just do something outlandish in that vein that is so awesome and fun, and like who doesn't want an ice cream truck with showing up to this event that you're at. And so I think by doing like a flash in the pan, like a splashy experience like that in a place where all of your buyers already are, I think you could end up creating some demand for what you do, start some conversations while you're on site at the event. Another play that might work there too is doing content-based networking live at events. That's worked really well for us. We've gone to HubSpot's event Inbound and created a lot of content while we were at Inbound. We've done it at the B2B marketing forum in Boston. And so I think by doing content collaborations on site at events is a way that you could do it in 3 days. In 3 weeks, I would probably stretch that out a little bit longer. And let me see here. 3 weeks. What would I do?
so you got a little bit more runway now. It's the beginning of the month. We need
Yeah,
that
a little
demand
bit
before
more
the end of
runway.
the month.
Yep. So
For the
three
end of the
weeks.
month.
I wonder if direct mail might take too long. But if I think direct mail to people's homes with a very creative. I think I actually have something right here. There's a guy that has been trying to sell me data services, and we're going to end up going with him. But
Mm.
he just sent me this Hot Wheels in a little box the other day with a letter in it. And this is the second piece of direct mail that he sent me um, over the course of a few weeks. But I think doing something fun, getting it into somebody's actual mailbox, a physical thing, um, could spark conversations. The first time that guy sent me something, I sent him a text message that afternoon and got pricing from him. I mean, he effectively
Mm.
created demand for what he did by sending me that in the mail. So I would say 3 weeks, I'm going direct mail.
That's really fascinating. And this actually makes me think back, James, to something you said earlier in the conversation about talent. Direct mail is not a new play. That's been around forever. ABM has been a buzzword over the past 7, 8 years. Companies are doing it. And it strikes me that the differentiator now might be folks might say, oh, direct mail, ABM, I've heard that before. The creativity
Yep.
behind the campaign could now be the difference between you responding to it and you kind of maybe just giving it to your kids or tossing it into the trash.
Yep. Yep. I think creative. I mean, Gary Vee says this all the time. The creative is the variable of success. And so whether that's your LinkedIn ads, whether that's your direct mail, whether that's the premise of your show, I mean, what you've done here with Demand Wars is a brilliant premise. And that's going to make it stand out in a sea of shows that look very similar, particularly in the marketing space. And so yeah, I absolutely am a huge believer that creative is the variable.
I love that. So now you've got 3 whole months, James. And the interesting thing about starting a show, maybe a podcast based show or doing content based networking, is that it doesn't, especially if you're doing it the right way, it doesn't necessarily bring pipeline to your door on day one or maybe even in month one.
Yeah.
What are you doing if you've got a whole quarter? Are you actually launching a podcast? What's the play here to bring demand in within 3 months?
Yeah. So I think the play here would be to launch the show about your buyers, start reaching out to as many people in the space as you can, start doing conversations with them, figuring out like I'm starting to get really bullish on this whole content franchise thing, and start thinking about what are different angles that you could be taking. Maybe you don't use an entire interview that you do with somebody, but you take like a clip of what they said, and you integrate a clip of what they said into maybe a roundtable discussion with you and maybe one other person on your team. Maybe it's a subject matter expert, and you all are just talking about that one quote from a CEO that you talked to for the series. You're still getting to feature them, but you also
Mm,
get to keep the authority that comes from listeners of that show. And so one thing I found, we did thousands of B2B growth interviews, and we were not in the driver's seat of a show that was ours. Every single episode we were talking to somebody else, and
mm,
the lion's share of the content was pointed at them. And so it was keeping us from being able to build the authority and trust that we wanted to build as a brand. And so if I had 3 months, I'm for sure going all in on content-based networking. I'm asking as many people as I can to be on the show. And then I'm systematically following up with them based on the conversations we've had in the pre-interview and the post-interview. I'm probably going to
mm,
do original research with them in the pre or post interview. So I'm going to have a list of 10 questions that I'm going to ask them either in the 15-minute, 30-minute pre-interview call that I schedule with them, independent of the actual interview, or I'm just going to tack it on
mhm,
right after the interview in the last few minutes and just say, hey, I've got 10 questions that I'd love to pick your brain on. And then what you're doing there is
right.
you're doing original research, which could be a whole nother content franchise. It could be a digital asset. You could end up charging a membership to for your market to get access to this original research that you've done. But then you've also got the content for the show itself, the actual interview that you did that was about, whatever theme that your podcast is related to. And so, but I think
Mm,
it's the relationship building and the follow up with your guests, not in a way that says I'm going to pound you over the head with my solution. That's not how you're going to build affinity. That's not how you're going to get somebody to want to engage with you. But what's so beautiful about content collaboration is it gives you a lot of space. I mean, I now know you're a big Black Panther fan, and I know that you've got a 15-year-old, and like I know all of these things about you because we've now done this content collaboration for the last half an hour. And so leveraging that information to actually build friendship with somebody gives you an opportunity to
mm,
ask them questions that you wouldn't get to ask them if you were just a cold DM showing up
mm,
in their LinkedIn inbox, or a cold email that probably went to their
yeah.
spam folder anyway. And so you can get insights into your offer and like, hey, can you like here's what we're bringing to market. I'd love to get your feedback on it. And so that's the play that I would run if I had 3 months. That and the Chris Walker kind of like creating educational videos and then putting paid distribution behind those videos. We started running that playbook
Mm,
probably 4 or 5 months ago, and it took about 2 or 3 months
mm,
for it to start producing opportunities for us. And I think within 2 months it produced what the largest referral partner we've ever had in the history of the company, and they found us
amazing.
because
Amazing.
of those videos. So I think content-based networking where you're following up with your guests in a systematic way, and then running the Chris Walker kind of LinkedIn, not bottom of funnel, buy our thing type videos, but videos about your point of view, educating the market on your why, your
Mm,
mission, and how that fits into making them better at work, and then distributing those videos exact using money to pay to get those videos in front of the exact people that they need to be in front of.
mm, mm. Goodness, it's fascinating. I'm a fan of professional sports. I grew up playing soccer or football, as we called it in Nigeria. So I watch the Premier League, and the World Cup is coming up. I love to watch professional basketball. And it strikes me that at that high level, the difference between good and great is inches,
Mm,
it's millimeters. It's small nuances. Some of the things that you're sharing right now, James, it to the naked eye, it feels like, well, we've kind of heard that before. I think I heard him say do a podcast. But then you talked about concepts like content franchises. You talked about clipping out content and then commenting on it. This is something we've been seeing creators do on YouTube and TikTok for a while. As a matter of fact, James and I just talked about the Black Panther movie and how he recommended a YouTuber a director who comments on movies. So here we have a large piece of content, Black Panther. My wife and I do this habitually. We'll watch a movie, we come home, we turn on YouTube, we type in the movie title, explained, right? And now we want to hear the discourse about the content, right? So it's a whole, you might just say, oh, they're just going to watch Black Panther, or you might say they're about to go into a rabbit hole for the next week of all this content, auxiliary content about the Black Panther franchise. So I'm just amazed that there's actually a lot of nuances we can sort of pull out for what you're sharing here, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing such a fantastic job with these nuances just in the setup, the preparation, the framing of how what you're doing with this show. So if you're listening to this show, this is the exact kind of stuff that you need to be thinking about. I mean, you're doing brilliant things like borrowing the branding of the one of the most iconic movie franchises of all time in Star Wars. You're borrowing the affinity that people have for an existing franchise, and you're baking it into content that you're doing. You're making it competitive and like a game show, and you're going to take clips and do these. I mean, it's those little nuances that that's such a great way to explain it, because it's that's where you win. That's where you build affinity, is in those what seem like small nuances, but make all the difference in the world.
James, I want to get your take on something that us marketers in the echo chamber on LinkedIn have been talking about for maybe the past year or so, which is marketing like a media company. We're all fans of Netflix, of Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and we're starting to see some of the big brands, Salesforce. They've got Salesforce Plus. Patrick Campbell at Profitwell,
Yep.
Paddle.
Yep.
They've got the Recur network. Um, there's a lot of people that are starting to market like a media company, and yet, even though we're starting to understand the why it's valuable, I'm not sure marketers have a grasp on the how. So
Mm.
if you've got a B2B marketer and they say, okay, 20% of my budget next year is for creating content and marketing like a media company, what in the world, what's that supposed to look like, James?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's honestly why I'm so bullish on what we're doing with podcasting and show development. We're starting to call them shows now instead of calling them podcasts, because what a show allows you to do, when you think of show, you think visual component. So there's video incorporated into what you're doing. It's not just an audio. You think of podcast, you just think of audio. um, but when you develop a show, you've got video baked into it. If you develop that show correctly, you've got segments, you've got an interesting hook or premise. You've got the ability to engage with other people in your market, incorporate them into your show. Like I said, maybe it's just a clip of something they've said, of a conversation that you've had, and it's your team's commentary on that thing that somebody said. There's so many different ways that you can slice this pie, but I think starting a show is the way to get started in this space, because it creates video content that's going to play really well on social. You can turn it into written content if you want to rank for particular keywords that you're going after. You can do specific episodes intended to deliver a high quality of content in an audio and video format that your writing team or the content marketer on your team can then take and make sure that they create a piece of content that ranks on Google for it. So the ability to slice and dice a show to plug into all different facets of your of your marketing mix. You can run paid ads against the clips that come from your show. I mean, there's just so many different things you can do with it. You can activate your show on the road and start going to conferences instead of paying $50,000 for a trade show booth. What if you took your show on the road? And I heard Chris Walker talk about this. I think it's brilliant. But like, what if you rented an Airbnb in the same city as a big event that your market was going to be at, and you just started doing interviews with all the speakers at the event, and you said, hey, we're going off site here, and we're recording this content. You can now be in the room where it happens, so to speak, because you just created the room where it happens, and you can do it for a lot less money than what you would spend to be at a trade show booth that nobody wants to come to anyway, because who wants to go visit trade show booths? So that's why I think starting with a show, if you want to start acting like a media company, makes so much sense. I mean, even the term show development, there's a creative component to it that I think marketers actually really love. Like they want to be creative, but the playbooks of yesteryear don't lend themselves to the creative execution that having a show lends itself to. And so obviously very biased here,
Yeah.
but I think the way that brands start to do this is by thinking about what's the show that we want to bring to market, knowing that eventually it might be multiple shows inside of a network, similar to Recur, similar to what we're doing with B2B growth, but you got to start somewhere.
I love that. I love that, James. We're gonna wrap it up because we're coming up on time, and you're in hot demand right now. So we want to let you get to your next session.
You got a movie to see.
But I want to make sure I got a movie to see. You're right. I want to make sure we get your take on this segment of the show we call Reality Roulette. Okay, so we've all watched and seen reality shows over the years, starting from MTV's Real World back in the 90s through The Apprentice, Survivor. We're trying to develop, so we're doing show development now on this one. We're doing it live. We're doing it live, James. We're trying to develop a show for B2B marketers about B2B marketers, and you have to build it on the premise of an existing, known, and loved reality show. What reality show would you frame this show on, and what might the show look like? Go.
Oh man, I was gonna go with The Office, but The Office isn't a reality show.
Ooh,
Yeah,
Office is a classic.
I would say American Idol. And would you consider American Idol a reality show? I mean, it is a reality show, right? It's a talent show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So American Idol, where you've got B2B marketers presenting in front of a panel of judges, and they let's call back to what you did. They have to present in front of a panel of judges how they would create demand in 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months. And the panel of judges determines whether or not they pass to the next round. So that's my on the fly premise development using a reality show. That's what I think I would do.
You know, the funny thing, James, about American Idol, my wife and I watched it religiously for the first maybe 2 to 3 seasons. You know, I can still remember all the winners.
Yep.
And they actually injected a number of things that made it not just a talent show. They would always let through a couple of candidates that, good Lord knows, their mom should have told them they could not sing. But somehow, why did they get on the show? For the humor, right? It was intentional. They would almost create. It's almost like when you're developing a boy band these days. You've got the cute one, you've got the brooding one, you've got the funny one. Like, they would give us characters to root after, so everybody could see themselves in the show. And so there's a lot of fun, I think, that one could actually have by even the casting process before you select the contestants could be fun.
Yes, I love that. That's yeah. This stuff is so fun, man. The dreaming up different concepts with the intent of trying to surprise and delight your market. I mean, what better profession in the world is there than marketing, where we get to play and try to figure this stuff out. I love what we get to do.
This is great. James, we could do this for another hour. Hopefully, we have the opportunity to get you back, maybe on another show. But, folks, we've been enjoying the company of James Carbary, exec producer of your favorite marketer's favorite show, B2B Growth, the force behind Sweetfish Media, the counselor of content based networking, abbot of affinity. Yes, thank you for hanging out on Demand Wars.
Thank you so much. This has been a blast.
All right, folks, we will see you on the next edition of the Demand Wars. Bye for now.